More and more cities and towns fell to the Galactic invaders. In some places, the soldiers of Earth started to use guerrilla tactics as they laid ambushes against infantry and armor. They placed mines on the roads used by the vehicles, and were able to surprise nearby patrols.
I have to take cover.
This strategy was risky, but sometimes very effective. However, most of the time, the enemy forces were simply too many and spread out to ambush a certain site. Towns that were overrun often had nothing left but soldiers unable to retreat during earlier battles. Their morale was low, as well as their supplies and food. With the enemy swooping the area, many of them decided to hide instead of fight. Those who did choose to take a stand saw the urban environment as their advantage, as buildings and walls could be used as cover and quick escape routes. Those in the larger streets fell prey to the incoming tanks, as the Geonosian infantry and others started to search the houses one by one. Some soldiers cramped up in a tall building to make their last stand, provided as they had great oversight of their surroundings. But it also meant that they could be easily encircled, and it did not take long before they fell without really doing too much damage against Yoda's forces. The streets were littered with bodies, as more infantry went through sophisticated house searches. Those who were still standing lost all hope and hoped for a quick end, as their friends and home fell to the ferocious invader. As the Galactic forces stamped over Central Europe, small towns got the order to hold as long as possible to give the armies of Earth more time to restock and utilize new technologies. Most of the towns stood no chance, but a small forest village managed to gather men from all parts of the world to hold their defensive line. The thick forest at the edge of town meant it was difficult for Yoda to send in his tanks, and so the enemy would mostly be sending infantry and walkers. The artillery at their disposal was not as powerful as some other parts of the world, but nevertheless proved useful against infantry. Cover was provided by soldiers inside the houses and behind sandbags stashed between the fences. The open space between the tree line and the edge of the village proved useful, as the droids were easy to spot targets for the soldiers of Earth. Multiple armored cars were stationed to keep some of the enemies pinned down with constant machine gun fire. Nevertheless, the droids and Geonosians did manage to get closer and closer to the border of the village. One armored car was completely shot up, but the machine gun was still operational. As the enemy came closer, the soldiers of Earth started to lose men. The one stationed at the sandbags died first, holding the front line. The soldiers in the building held out longer as they had a good overview, but the enemy kept in sending more men. It was evident that the border would eventually be overrun. There was only so much the riflemen could do before being picked off themselves. And though their efforts were valiant, eventually they perished and several towns got overrun. But the tragedy for Earth did not stop there. Though it was apparent that Earth was losing the battles in the sky, it also became clear they were no match for the invading tanks. The earlier armored assaults failed, the tanks of Earth still were able to take out a few deployed by Yoda. But against many at once, the forces of Earth stood no chance. Every frontal assault ended up in a disaster, as wrecks and bodies covered the ground. Battles did not last long, and ended in mere minutes in decisive victories for the invader. Some of the politicians of Earth did not believe their technology would improve enough to fight off the Galactic forces. Instead, they voted to steal some of the enemy's technology and use it against them. But doing this required stealth and finesse. There was no way Yoda's troops would let the armies of Earth get anywhere close enough to steal some of their ships. So instead, Earth sent some of its best troops to sneak in behind enemy lines and retrieve a TIE fighter. The port where the fighters were stationed was heavily guarded, and the commandos needed to be careful not to get spotted. When a stormtrooper was blocking the way, they needed to be taken out quietly without gunfire. Everything seemed to go smooth. But eventually, they were spotted by one patrolling trooper who immediately called in reinforcements. This meant the plan changed. There was no time to figure out the control scheme of the TIEs, and so the officer was instructed to continue to destroy the stationed TIE fighters in case they were compromised. The officer died in the battle, and more perished as they fled the scene while the ships exploded behind them. Only 4 managed to reach the boats, and as they headed off, were still being shot at by a stationed walker. Then there were those who called relying on the enemy's technology blasphemous. This was Earth's war, and shall be won with its own weapons and creations. Another frontal offensive was given green light, much to Rommel's and Montgomery's dismay. They no longer believed in solely frontal assaults, as many armor units of Earth were necessary to blow up only one enemy tank. The deployed AATs were much smaller in number, but their armor plating thick and their guns heavy. When both sides came into range, they opened fire, immediately blowing up several armored cars and light tanks. The armor on the flanks tried to encircle the AATs, but their shots did not seem to faze them one bit. Smoke, dust, and fire spread across the battlefield, as crippled tanks rid themselves of crew who desperately tried to run to friendly units for safety. The AATs did not slow down, and again, in a matter of minutes, the outcome of the battle had been set. Rommel and Montgomery were devastated by this battle. These men died for nothing. Their sacrifice meant nothing. They had gotten word that the German-created Panzer III was almost ready for deployment, and Rommel urged them to already start progress on a Panzer IV variant. With better armor on the way, Rommel requested a separate division of tanks and a newly developed Panzer III to flank the enemy in upcoming battles. In order to win, they would need to attack from both the front and the back. Rommel got his wish, and he recruited the best drivers and gunners in his division that received the name of Ghost Division.